For years, Jimmy Donaldson established the upper limits of what could be achieved within the technical and narrative constraints of YouTube. But migrating that format to a mature television setting required solving a new set of problems. Expanding to Amazon Prime Video meant addressing an audience that expects traditional narrative structure, long-form pacing, and emotional coherence. The production scale of Beast Games involved managing 1,000 contestants and 1,000 simultaneous cameras recording every moment of the competition. This visualization maps the resulting data weight. The production generated 1.7 petabytes of raw, unscripted footage, the digital equivalent of 400,000 full-length Hollywood film reels. The mandate was to distill that sprawling archive of material into highly structured 40-minute episodes. Successfully balancing the immediate retention tactics of the internet with the deliberate pacing of traditional television required a focus on narrative structure over simple data storage. The individual tasked with architecting a bridge between these two media environments was Mac Hopkins, a systems-focused editor who had already built a reputation for shaping the visual language of massive digital channels. Hopkins approached the project with a specific technical thesis. The limits of high-frequency editing are cured by applying traditional cinematic architecture. Executing that thesis relied on three distinct pillars. The first pillar was establishing a robust data ingestion architecture to manage the sheer volume of chaotic material. The second pillar required a shift in pacing. Hopkins engineered a structure that favors deliberate visual holds over constant rapid-fire splices. The third pillar involved mapping the tension mechanics of Hollywood films directly onto the unscripted reality audio to drive the narrative forward. Hopkins engineered a new algorithmic cinematic equation to govern modern media production. While the standard digital content model relies on a solitary editor, a project the size of Beast Games required a 20-person editorial department working in absolute synchronization. When an editor drops 1,000 individual camera tracks into a software project simultaneously, the timeline instantly becomes an illegible wall of digital noise. Scrubbing through that volume of footage for random moments of high energy is mathematically impossible. Hopkins compared the process to grocery shopping, pulling only the exact ingredients needed for a specific plot point. He developed a custom sorting workflow to physically organize the disparate clips by narrative event, rather than relying on raw timecodes. By compartmentalizing the footage, his entire team of assistant editors could process petabytes of material under a single structural vision. Before any creative storytelling could begin, Hopkins had to construct a massive architectural foundation capable of supporting that data load. The prevailing logic on digital platforms dictates that editors must execute a new visual cut every 2 to 3 seconds to prevent viewer drop-off. This split-screen timeline visualization shows how constant visual churn is typically propped up by fast dialogue. In contrast, Hopkins intentionally used fewer cuts and relied on longer visual holds to build organic interest. During a high-stakes psychological sequence, like a contestant risking elimination over the shape of a dalgona cookie, he slowed the edit down to match the internal pressure of the moment. At this scale, 40-minute retention is secured by emotional through-lines, as visual stimulus alone loses its efficacy over long durations. To manufacture those emotional through lines, Hopkins used classic Hollywood film sequences as exact structural blueprints for his unscripted reality footage. One sequence presented a massive problem: engineering tension in a room where 1,000 contestants were completely silent, meticulously stacking small wooden blocks. To solve the silence, he borrowed an auditory mechanic from the director Christopher Nolan. He deployed the slow riser technique from Dunkirk, dragging a single frequency upward for an extended duration. He then paired the riser with a persistent, organic ticking noise, forcing a sense of urgency onto the silent competitors. By merging those two mechanics, a quiet room full of people stacking blocks absorbed the psychological tension of a bomb defusal scene. Hopkins proved his value by thinking in cinematic language, overlaying Hollywood psychology onto chaotic reality footage. The Nolan technique was part of a systemic approach to production design and emotional mapping. The high-contrast, neon-on-dark visual language of Tron provided clear spatial logic for the massive physical sets. This allowed viewers to immediately identify different competition zones within a darkened, cavernous arena. Hopkins also used the character arcs of Terminator 2 to shape contestant stories. he prioritized moments where competitors sacrificed their own position to aid others, transforming a simple game into a character-driven drama with genuine emotional stakes. Treating reality footage as raw material for genre filmmaking allowed the production to bypass the limitations of typical digital content algorithms. The definitive test of this hybrid editing system was how it would be received by a diverse, global streaming audience. Within 25 days of its debut, Beast Games generated 50 million views worldwide, making it Prime Video's most watched unscripted series ever. This bar chart outlines the market capture. The final output hit the #1 position on Prime Video in more than 80 different countries. More than half of that viewership originated outside the United States. The pacing and tension structures functioned across entirely different languages and cultures. The metrics proved Hopkins successfully translated a hyper-local internet format into a universally understood cinematic experience. The project demonstrated that the precise mathematical tension of cinema can effectively organize massive quantities of digital, unscripted content. By merging a scalable data pipeline, deliberate visual holds, and classical audio mechanics, the editing system stabilized petabytes of raw chaos. The constant use of high-frequency jump cuts has become an obstacle to long-form engagement rather than an asset. The next generation of high-performing digital media requires stringent structural architecture and intentional emotional design. By engineering a system to digest petabytes of noise into structured emotion, Mac Hopkins built a new production standard for the digital media industry.